Okay, so this debate I'm gonna judge. It's not. I haven't read it yet. I don't know if it's gonna be any good or not. It's. Let's see, what is it called? The biggest cause of the Civil War was slavery. Oh, let me show you my desktop. Hold on. I got a lot of windows there, just ignore that. Biggest cause of the Civil War was slavery. It is between Moozer, 325, and Lemming. I've read a few of Lemming's debates. He's decent. I don't think I've read any of Moozer's. Let's see. Disclaimer, please note the use of the word biggest in the title. I've learned my lesson, and it would not be used using ambiguous terms like main. Main and biggest are the same thing in this context, man. And if any opponent tries to, semantically argue different, I'm just gonna ignore it, because that's them being silly. Okay, so let's get to Moozer's argument. I quote from Article 4, Section 3 of the Confederate Constitution. No slave or other person held to service or labor in any state or territory of the Confederate States under the laws thereof, escaping lawfully carried into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such slave belongs, or to whom such service or labor may be due. Is that even in fucking English? It's legalese, and it's old legalese at that. No slave held in service to the Confederate States shall be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up upon the claim of the party to whom such slave belongs, or to whom such slave service or labor may be due. Okay, so I guess we'll see how that helps his case. I quote from Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens: "Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideals. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstones rest upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and moral condition." I thought he was on the other side of this. Bro, it seems like he's supporting... The states' rights issue has come up before, but the incidents had almost nothing to do with the Civil War. In this specific event, the state right in question was slavery, and almost nothing else. If other rights were in question, they were minimal at cost. You can see this by the fact that all states broke away, all practiced slavery. It's improbable that it's just a coincidence that all states of the Confederacy has slavery. The economic issue is also just slavery, seeing the South's economy relied heavily on slave labor on their plantations. The election of Abraham Lincoln was also about slavery. The South thought Lincoln would take their slaves away and left, while other issues were at play. Okay, so he's arguing the exact... Oh, for some reason I thought he was con. Okay. That's why I was confused. Really, I should re-record that so I don't sound dumb, but we're going to keep that in there. Let's see. So let's go create a new note. Slavery debate. I'm going to delete this note after I'm done too, because I don't really, unless I have like some great insight. I'll teach you guys about Obsidian later. Let's do this. No, we'll go. Okay, I'm gonna copy and paste this so nobody has to sit here watching me type. Alright. Why can't, there's no like, let's go slavery and Constitution. Confederate Vice President. Confederate Vice President. Pro-slavery. These aren't great arguments, by the way. I don't know if that'd matter, but they're not great arguments. That'd be like showing that, I don't know, like there's some people that are pro-abortion in the United States, and if we had like a civil war, it'd be over abortion or something. It doesn't. It's not. I'm sure he could do more here. You thought of this, Moozer. You're just kind of like, it's almost like he's writing off the top of his head and then googling stuff. Copy these. Those are arguments we can copy right in here. There we go. And this is going to be pro. And see cons arguments, and if he does any rebuttals there. Well then, I shall make my arguments. This is silly. Nobody cares, man. Let's make your arguments. Table X, biggest cause. History is full of secessions. Tables often stand several legs rather than one, so slavery is a much bigger cause. America so than one. Be slavery so much bigger cause. Half. The war was fought by the Union. What I asked was the cause of the Union, not freeing of slaves. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps save this Union. And what I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union. So he's saying that like he's putting his Lincoln is saying that he's putting the Union first. That his efforts are to save the Union. That doesn't mean that the South didn't leave because of slavery. Only that the North wasn't as concerned, or wasn't claiming to be as concerned about it. Southern leaders of the Civil War period placed the blame of the outbreak on fighting squarely on Lincoln. They accused the president of acting aggressively towards the South and of deliberately provoking war in order to overthrow the Confederacy. For its part, the Confederacy sought to a peaceable accommodation of its legitimate claims to independence and resorted to measures of self-defense only when threatened by Lincoln's coercive policy. Thus, Confederate Vice President Alexander H. Stephens claimed that the war was inaugurated by Mr. Lincoln. Stephens rarely acknowledged that General Beauregard's troops fired the first gun, but he argued the larger truth is that not in personal or national conflicts, it is not he who strikes the first blow or fires the first gun that inaugurates or begins the conflict. Rather, the true aggressor is the first who renders force necessary. Yeah, I would agree with that analysis as far as who instigates a war. Not that it's really relevant to the debate too much, or maybe it is. The War of Northern Aggression is the name the people of the South gave after. Of course they would. Each side is going to make their case. The main point here, if we take half the cause of the war to be the Union's leaders seeking to maintain control, we need only a small sliver of cause to prevent slavery as reason. Let us think not just South. He posted. I don't like how Lemming writes. This is really like a very annoying style. Maybe it's just me. Maybe most people enjoy reading this style, but I don't like it. And also don't like these little rhymes here, followed by like heavy quotes. Let's see. Where are we at? The main point here, if we take the cause of the war to be the Union's leaders seeking to maintain control, we need only some small sliver of cause to prevent slavery as reason. Let us think now to the South. He posted one lie circling that only 1% of white Southerners owned slaves. In 1860, 1% of white Southern families owned 200 or more human beings. But in states of the Confederacy, at least 20% owned at least one. And in Madison, SC, Missouri and South Carolina ran as high as 50%. Even with the inflated numbers, ownership of slaves only rise to 50%. I believe the people cause to fight to support their states, the countries to be slavery. To quote the Confederate generals, sure they had a myriad of reasons. To quote the Confederate general, that doesn't mean slavery wasn't the main one for the war. It could mean that the people are fighting a different war than the government. You know, the people are fighting for freedom, the government's fighting for something else. To quote a Confederate general, I must side either with or against my section of country. I cannot raise my hand against my birthplace, my home, my children. I should like above all things that our difficulties might be peacefully arranged, and still trust that the merciful God, whom I will not unnecessarily afflict us, may yet allay the fury for war. Whatever may be the result of the contest, I foresee that the country will have to pass through a terrible ordeal. A necessary expiation, perhaps, of our national sins. May God direct all for our good, and shield and preserve you and yours. To quote a common Confederate soldier, not actually a general, what we struggled for, and that was state rights. Julius Howe, audio recording, is an old man speaking of his and other reasons for fighting when he was 16 years old. Long ago. And neither side is really like making much of a case. This is going to be very frustrating to judge, I can already tell. A more modern poll. In 2011, the 150th anniversary of beginning of Civil War, a number of polling organizations asked Americans about the roots of the conflict. So 150 years after the events, you're asking people what they feel. What does that do? These people weren't around at the time. Wouldn't historians who study the writings of people from that time period maybe be a better source to support your argument? Question wordings which offered the options of states' rights or slavery as main cause found pluralities choosing states' rights over slavery. For example, Pew found 38% saying that the main cause of the Civil War was slavery, and 48% saying states' rights. Self-identified Southerners were no more likely to say states' rights than others, and blacks were only a little bit more likely than whites to say slavery rather than states' rights. So what? Oh my God, Lemming, man. I'll not deny slavery is one of the main causes of the American Civil War, but big beyond and any other reasons. I say again, were the Union soldiers fighting with slavery as their cause first and foremost? Not even abolitionists supported the Civil War? No, the soldiers wouldn't be. And if he wants to make the case that most soldiers, if he wants to interpret the resolution that way, that most soldiers were fighting for something else other than that, then I guess he could maybe make this debate a little bit easier for himself. Even in modern America, we see divides between peoples, and this again in modern times, where so many have traveled, settled, mixed between states and creeds, divides in laws and ideals and beliefs. Succession happened in the American Civil War because a stronger identity of state and nation existed. Secession was caused by states being more separate in both power and identity, for the neutering performed by central government had not yet occurred. Small reasons adding up don't matter so much as the cause of self-rule. Even with beliefs, small communities are not able to succeed. And what matters most was the cause was strong state identity and infrastructure allowing control. The South was able to attempt secession so well because states were much more their own. States' rights is not some buzzword, some sorry attempt by the South to excuse their actions, It is a very identifiable movement within the history of America. Yeah, we have the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers that argue between a strong central government and states' rights. What mattered most was the separation of states as identity. Look to Quebec and Canada. Is the cause of such a movement some people wanting this or that law, or is it because a group of people existing, wanting autonomy and having power, having a system of infrastructure, a government running already their own? If not for taxation, would Americans have stayed with the British? My opponent has a North burden of proof on him to prove slavery as the biggest cause of the Civil War. He quotes an article in Personal Times, but I rebut that these are pretexts more than causes. I mean, you have to prove their pretext, though, Con. And he has to prove that they're causes. Okay, so most soldiers, let's say, did not care about slavery. States had an identity, I guess I would call that argument. What else did he argue? Let's see if I can refresh my memory here. States' rights? You didn't really prove states' rights, you only proved that people care about them. The North was aggressive. Well, why was the North aggressive? You have to show why. War of Northern aggression. So you see, these aren't strong arguments from either side. Let's see. I think the rebuttals are really what's going to matter here. This, I can already see, this is small. So you didn't... I like to think about how long it takes to respond to. Let's see, 5:24 at 6:45 p.m. 5:24 at 2:55 p.m. 3. So he probably saw this 3 hours later and then made a 10-minute response. You're not gonna do well in debates, but how much time did they have to argue? 2 days. So you should have took, Moozer, you should have took close to 48 hours to respond. Because if you had free time, then you really should have took, because one, just think about the argument, sleep on it, reread it a few times, and then start investigating their claims. Your biggest point was about half the war being fought by the Union, and the Union not fighting for slavery. I think the problem here is the difference between fighting in a war and causing a war. Remember the title debate about the underlying causation of war. Now that's true. The difference between fighting war and causing war. Remember the title of this is about the underlying causation of war. There we go. Let's see. The right cause of the Civil War was the South secession. If you were to ask what the cause of the whole war was, you need to look at why the South broke away. And if you do that, you find slavery as the biggest piece of the puzzle. That's part of that rebuttal too. Let's just put that in there. That's a better response than what I thought it was going to be. Okay. Sure, the Union wasn't fighting for slavery, but that is besides the point. I like this. You're conceding a point, you're taking it away from and saying it doesn't matter. A lot of times you can just skip a whole argument and avoid it just by conceding the point. The question is what caused the war, not why did both sides fight the war. I know those sound similar, but they are actually very different. Yeah, they do sound similar, and it fooled me for a minute. It's a good point, Moozer. Directly speaking, the war would not have been fought if not for the South secession. Thus the South directly caused the war. Thus the only matters was the South fighting for, not the North, because though they may have contributed to it, they did not, strictly speaking, cause it. Other things caused the South to split, but the fact still remains that the South directly caused the war, and so it's only the motivations of the South that matter when we talk about the cause of the war. Your second point goes on to say that the real biggest cause was a strong feeling of identity to one's states. See, all these points are recognized. He's taking them one by one. That's very good, that you're not missing any of his premises or his arguments. You back this up by quoting people who fought in war, but they were not the ones who made the decision to split. Sure, it seems okay to quote these because they fought in the war, but nationalists use almost every war to get people to enlist. If you were to delegate at a secession convention, would you vote to leave the Union just because you liked your state better? The reason the secession was declared was because of the North's perceived aggression on the issue of slavery. Loyalty to your state was used as a device to get non-slave owning public to support the war. Moozer, I think you can make the same argument and just support it a little bit better. Right now you're just saying this stuff, you're not giving it much support. But I do like how you're handling this. The response to this was the war was initiated by the South's secession. He said that there were low numbers of people who actually owned slaves in the South, but it wasn't the people who made the decision to war, it was the wealthy. That's usually the case. Slave-owning elite, and they used the patriotism to spur involvement. My quote from Alexander Stephens stands because he was of the ruling class. It's easy to confuse the reason people signed up and the reason everyone went to war, but there's a difference. A lot of this here, well, I agree with the premises, maybe not the conclusion, but I agree with the premises. It's like it was so wealthy he really decided to go to war. It's not supported, other than we kind of, like, a lot of us know it's intuitively true, but our intuitions could be wrong. You know, those are just biases and prejudices, and they could be BS, especially when it comes to emotional things like the rich are ruining everything. It's really easy to feel that way, especially if you're not part of the wealthy or the ruling elite. And but you need to show that these are the main causes, and you need to support your premises a little bit better. Is the fuel any less a cause of fire than the spark? Try sparking some water wet tinder. What, I ask you, could be lit? Lemming, you have to argue, man. Stop speaking poetically. Maybe this is the annoying part. Countries have seceded before in history without war. See my round one list. What changed in this case of the American Civil War? The North refused to allow a state to exert its right to self-sovereignty. How many rounds is this before going further? Someone know? Okay, so 4 rounds. Countries have seceded before in history without war. See my round one list. What changed in the case of the Civil War? You need to say what changed, not let him decide. Well, I guess you can't do answer here. The North refused to allow a state to exert its right to self-sovereignty. How hypocritical the sons of the American Revolution from Britain. It's 16 presidencies away. What, 16 times 4 is like... That's from George Washington, not even the American Revolution. It's at least 50 years away. They don't... It's not hypocritical. It's a different generation. That doesn't matter. Okay, so... It's actually a good point by Khan. Why couldn't they just let it succeed? And this is where Pro should have actually stated why, instead of just claiming that. Get some evidence to support it. What causes a fight between two individuals? Let us use a bully as an example. Many people he's able to take their lunch money from. Eventually someone fights back. When speaking of said incidents, it is only the bully's desire for lunch money that caused the fight. No other participants' will existed, their refusal to give in. By such logic, a bully might even be able to avoid such people with will. The bully would see not their action of lunch money taken as the cause of the fight, but human will. But you seem to ignore secession and the North refused to grant the South freedom from the Union. You then focus on slavery. Is this not regression of cause? Should one ignore human will or the bully's actions, regress further back to hunger or slight meanness as the cause? But then, where does regression stop? Why not step further back from slavery as the main cause of the Civil War? If America had never broken from England, there would have been no American states. Now you're just going off the rails, buddy. If America had never broken from England, there would have been no American states have war. So now it's Great Britain's fault that the United States had Civil War. Come on, dude. The Articles of Confederation created a loose union of states. The Confederation's central government consisted of a unicameral Congress with legislative and executive function, and was composed of delegates from each state in the Union. From its very start, the ideal of individual states existed within America. Separations between people, individual sovereign. I thought, maybe I just remember it was confusing Lemming for someone else, because I said he was decent before. Or maybe he is, and maybe it's just this debate. Even really good debaters can just go off the rails and have terrible performances. I know I have. What war can be fought by an unwilling populace? Look at the stages before World War II and the people's unwillingness to fight. The appeasement of Hitler. How could a war without... Okay, let's go back to this real quick. You see, Pro provides rebuttals for this. Most soldiers did not care about slavery. He says that's not the cause of the war. Okay? States have identity. He said you can quote these people that were individual soldiers, but not the ruling elite that caused the war. And then we have Pro's arguments, which have gone unaddressed. Slavery in the Constitution. Confederate vice presidents pro-slavery. The South's economy relied heavily on slavery, which I think is actually a point that Khan could turn to his favor. He could say, oh, Lincoln was trying to destroy him economically. It was about, being able to feed your family, not slavery. You could have turned that on him, Khan, but you just ignored this argument. The election of Abraham Lincoln was about slavery. The South thought that Lincoln would take their slaves away and left. You haven't addressed any of Pro's points so far. This debate is looking like Khan can't win because he's ignoring Pro's arguments. And he's ignoring, actually, most of Pro's rebuttals other than the War of Northern Aggression rebuttal. Saying that the war was initiated by the South secession. That's the only one he's addressed. And I think he's responded well, but you have more arguments here you have to look at. I think this is an issue of getting too wrapped up in your own argument when you debate. You're wrapped up in your own argument and you're not looking at what your opponent is arguing. And you're not even looking at... I wonder how fast he responded. Let's see how fast he responded. 524, 818. 524, almost 7 p.m. and almost 8 p.m., right? So that means the second, he probably was offline taking a shit or something. And the second he got on, he just instantly spat this out. You guys aren't thinking about your arguments. You guys are just treating this like a conversation. You have 2 whole days to respond. You have 2 days to think about his arguments and come up with a response. Instead, you read it and then immediately, either while you're reading it or immediately after you read it, you start writing your argument. That's dumb. Read your opponent's argument 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Sleep on it, because your brain can process their argument while you're sleeping. I try not to ever make an argument without sleeping on it, because sleep is where your subconscious starts working on these problems with their arguments and stuff. You'll always sleep on it. Then always take your time. Dude, if you have 7 days for an argument, you should take 7 days. Even if you do no writing or no researching for 7 days. If you have 3 hours the day after to write an argument and only 45 minutes to write an argument 7 days after, wait the 7 days and just do it in the 45-minute time period. You're going to have better responses than you would doing it immediately with more time. You're nearly... Moozer quotes the bully example that Kahn gives. You're nearly on to something here, but let's think about this from the principal's position. Assuming you correctly knew all the information about stealing lunch money...
Dad.
Hey buddy, what's up?
Can I get me
Are you okay?
this?
I gotta pause this, guys. Hold on. What's wrong, buddy? What happened?
No.
Were you picking your nose?
No.
Okay.
I say yes.
You were? Okay, you're gonna have to stop. Because that bleeding is not... It doesn't look good. I want you to wipe the nose with this. I want you to get in the bath, okay? Get in the bath, and I want you to wash your face. You're going to stop picking for a week, okay? Your nails are too sharp. It's cutting your nose or something, okay? Oh my goodness, my kid, he came in here and he had a big nosebleed. And I think it's from picking his nose. He had like a scab in his nose and he picked it and it came off. So that, I don't know at first. It happened yesterday too. So I had to also make sure it was nose picking and not like something more serious, because 2 nosebleeds in like 2 days. And he admitted he picked his nose, so we solved that little mystery.
Dad,
Yeah.
hold on back.
Huh?
Hold on.
Do you know how to turn it up? That's as hot as it's getting right now, buddy. Alright, yeah, so just try to wash up, get out, dry off and stuff, okay? Yeah. Yeah, just wash up. You'll be fine, buddy. No, and to make matters worse, the hot water is out. Jeez Louise. So I think something's wrong with the water heater right now or something. I'll figure it out probably tomorrow. Because that's, I don't know. Creating that information was still, who would you punish more? Sure, both people played roles in the fight, but one played a much bigger role in starting it, and that was the bully. There are many different factors to play during Civil War. I see that, but I maintain that can theoretically be measured by which... Ignore his example, Crow. It's dumb and it's irrelevant. I mean, he's not dumb. Lemming is a smart guy, but the example is dumb and it's irrelevant. Both people played role. I mean, I know he was trying to communicate something. He just didn't do a good job because, again, he just spit out his argument in response to it instead of thinking about it. There were many different factors to play during the Civil War, but I maintain that it can theoretically be measured by which one issue had the most effect, and I maintain that slavery was that issue. And then he quotes Kahn again. You can then focus on slavery. Is this not regression of cause? Should one ignore human will or the bully's actions? Regress first. Okay, of course, saying that the colonies breaking away from the Great Britain was the cause of the Civil War is regression. But saying that slavery is the underlying issue behind states' rights is different. I get that you were using hyperbole, However, what I said is different. This time he took 2 days. I like that. This felt more thought out. As I said before, states' rights had come up before, but these instances had nothing to do with the Civil War specifically. This can be seen by looking at the regional lines on which the conflict fell. Other squabbles about the power of federal government have been from different states than the ones who seceded. Also, the states who left the Union were slave-owning states. There's almost no way that is random coincidence. There's a lot of way, actually. A state's rights, when used in the context of Civil War, just means a state's right to practice slavery. So, let me see. I just want to make sure, guys, that I'm on. Yeah, I am. Because the last time I recorded the vote, I was not on the correct screen. I think I got it wrong here. Wars before the modern era were fought by people who had no stake in what they were fighting for. Why would lots of Americans fight for independence if Britain's policies were mostly only negative effect on merchants? Why would ordinary people fight in 7 Years' War to gain land for their country if they didn't want to use that land? Post World War II, there were more media sources to cover wars, so ordinary Joes were dissuaded from the myth of dying a glorious death for your country. Before, war was a way to advance your social status, but now people are more conscious of what we are fighting for and are less likely to be moved by patriotism alone. I disagree that people are more aware. They're probably less aware. That's why when you have economic arguments for war, like this is why you can't give them to the masses. This war is important because of economic issues. And if we don't, protect our economy, even through the use of deadly force sometimes, then we'll turn into a third world country, and your family and loved ones will be starving in the streets. So you almost have to lie to people and say, "Hey, it's about freedom or something," because they just don't get that you're protecting them. Anyway, you end up your last argument by asking, what makes your mind slavery the biggest cause? So I suppose the only thing that I am by answering that. For one, the regional lines that conflict draw pretty clearly illustrates that slavery was at least a very major cause. This needed to be a 3-round debate. I'm already done with it. All states of Confederacy were slave-owning, so that makes it... He has a nosebleed because he was picking his nose again, and the water is not getting very hot, so we're going to have to maybe... We had that issue earlier, right? Yeah. We might have to make them aware of that.
Alright, well, I just talked to Randy, and you still have it in.
I do?
135.
135?
Yeah. Downstairs to take the test.
Oh, can I do it tonight, or?
Yeah.
I might just do it tonight.
Because it's out of service, the bathroom over there is out of service.
I might just go ahead and do it then.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm fully ready, but I can always retake.
Yeah, that's right, I told her, I'm like, I'm gonna go tell him now, because tomorrow night Lena works.
Yeah.
And you know how lazy she is.
Oh, well, I'm recording right now. I don't want to talk about anybody. But, I'll be done in a minute. You ended your last... Okay, so... You're talking about the regional areas. Well, in the case of Civil War, the states of the South was attempting to exercise their self-determination. The North stepped in to exercise its control over them, so the South, we want to be left alone, run our states by yours or not. This is... Oh my god, I got a whole nother round of this. Run our states by our wills, not yours. The North, nope. We tell you what to do and you obey. The schools often seem... Well, there's still semantics. Almost. Caused by slavery. Well, if you didn't want to have slavery, then, and you want to obey our will, then there won't be a war. So you can still argue that it's mostly slavery's fault. Schools often seem to hold that it takes two to tango. The South pushed at the start, perhaps, to get North's out of his business. What the?
Wait, and that's for using
It's literally like right after he read this, he just posted the argument. It annoys the shit out of me. Certainly, slavery was much discussed, but in the end, it came down to the North refusing to allow the South to control over their own lives. It really wasn't. Slavery was certainly enmeshed within the conflict, but to quote a Reddit person, don't do that. Don't quote a Reddit person. If my wife wanted to get her nose pierced and I wouldn't let her, and she said I couldn't control her, and I said, I damn well could, and she ended up divorcing me, what would you say was the cause? Nose piercing caused a divorce? Yeah, that's fair. It would also be fair to say, your controlling behavior. But that was the one I know. It was bad. It's okay, we'll put bleach on it.
And then yeah, have bleach.
Okay,
And we can use for bleach.
good.
I feel like I just ate my blood.
Was it yummy?
I do not want to taste for humans.
You don't?
Yeah.
You were talking about being a vampire earlier, so what do you think? Is it yummy enough to do that? I mean, I certainly hope not, because that's not a situation I want to deal with.
Mom, it even got in the book.
Though I do not deny slavery's cause of this.
And the book.
Deny slavery is a cause in the Civil War. States' rights is not this some nothing issue that only came about after wars that saved Southern wounds, but a theme for the start of the American Revolution to the Civil War and beyond. You can fight for states' rights while still remaining part of the Union, by the way. Virginia Ratification Convention. These are a bunch of quotes again. Very annoying. Just tell me what it says. I mean, I know you can spread them throughout debate, but don't over rely. The Virginia ratification made a final vote on George Wythe's motion to ratify, passing 89 to 79. Virginians reserved the right to withdraw from the new government. The remedy for the federal injury or oppression included amending the Constitution. Unlike the Pennsylvania Convention, where the Federalists railroaded the Anti-Federalists in all or nothing choice. In the Virginia Convention, the Federalists made efforts to reconcile with Anti-Federalists by recommending amendments like that of Virginia's Bill of Rights preamble to the 1776 Constitution. Okay, so these are just quotes talking about the importance of states' rights. That is, I mean, I don't understand how that Virginia seceded. He argued as one made vociferous responses to Jeffersonian Republicans that the sense of Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, which reserved the states' rights to secession and interposition, or you can see the South's concerns. It's very tough to read this, guys, especially yours, Lemming, because you're having a hard time concisely connecting arguments to your position. Overall, the northern population was growing much more quickly than the southern population, which made it increasingly difficult for the South to dominate the national government. By the time the 1860 election occurred, the heavily agricultural southern states as groups had fewer electoral college votes than the rapidly industrializing northern states. Abraham Lincoln was able to win 1860 presidential election without even being on the ballot in 10 southern states. Sounds like he was a very popular guy. Though slavery may have accentuated the issue in many southern minds was the lives being dictated by others. I doubt it. I mean, that's what's on most people's minds, but in general. But I mean, they weren't thinking about being micromanaged, I'm sure. But such logically wanted to blame the American Revolution on the French and Indian Wars. Oh, sure, the colonists said they were unhappy about taxes and lack of representation, but the cause of unhappiness was money caused by wars. It's progression. Early on in the start, you're bringing up other stuff that's not. Try to really narrow the frame of this. Early on in the start of the American Civil War, the cause of Southerners' lips was the right to self-determination of states' rights. Yeah, it's because it's hard to get somebody to die for slavery. The cause of Northerners' lips was obey. Probably not. They probably knew there were some very bad economic consequences for losing the southern states, at the very least. U.S. formal statements of why they were leaving slavery, but how is one to explain how one's rights are being violated without stating these violations? As for the people's motivation in war, through over 2 decades ago, is recent enough to speak of modern media. I remember people's patriotism and outrage over the event. Patriotism leading to many faraway lands, but that's not faraway lands in which soldiers are most spirited, I would argue, but in their own backyards. And the right and do and say these things fits in their backyards, not dictated by some far-off outsiders. Regional lines, yes, groups can be identified by something or other, but those identifying marks do not make the group's reasons for war the reason singular. Is that an attempt at French or something? This is fucking unnecessary. The raison singular. You could just say the singular reason, or the only reason. But it also hurts your case too. Because before you were saying that's a huge reason, like identity. Final round. We've been getting a little repetitive by now, so I guess I'm glad this is the last round. Yes, Moozer, you should have kept this 3 rounds instead of 4. You keep maintaining that the real cause was states' rights, and I keep pointing out that the biggest state right. It's true, you're making rebuttals, and he's ignoring your rebuttals. And so he goes off on the tangents. And possibly the only one was slavery. My last argument, so there is left to do is summarize and say some closing statements. States' rights had come up before, but in this specific context, the right being fought over was the right to slavery. The control the North was supposedly enforcing on the South was slavery. The North didn't want to take any slaves, but the South says that was...
Get in.
The control of the South was slavery. The North wanted to take any slaves. The South saw it as was to secede it because of slavery. Quote from Reddit person. At the first listen, now he seems pretty sound, but it has one fatal mistake. Don't even respond to shit like this, dude. It's the final round. Just explain why you won the debate. You don't have to respond to this. Nose piercing could have caused divorce, so caused the husband was overbearing tendencies. But while those piercings are pretty small in the grand scheme of things, slavery was not, and thus remains at least possible biggest cause of war. As I have shown you, the biggest cause. Well, there you still argue that nose ring was the biggest cause. Not to get defensive or anything, but you're wasting... Okay, so states' rights is not a nothing issue. Yeah. Whether it's a nothing issue or not is irrelevant to the debate. It's about what caused this specific war, not whether that's an important thing. Not to get defensive, but you're twisting my words here. I'm not saying the states' rights had nothing to do with the war. I'm just saying that almost the only right involved in the Civil War was the right to slavery. Saying that the Civil War was about states' rights is just the equivalent of saying it was about slavery. And then he quotes Connigan, such logic will lead one to blame the Revolution or the Indian Wars. Oh, sure, Connigan said they were happy about taxes or lack of representation, but the cause of unhappiness was money caused by wars. It's regression. But it's not, though. States' rights is such an ambiguous term, you are inclined to look a little closer, and when you do, you find, when talking about the Civil War, it just means slavery. The issue had come up numerous times before. I can read faster than I talk. I'm going to read through this, because there's nothing more important to say in this debate. I already know. If something comes up, I'll let you know. Well, anyways, it's been fun debating this with somebody who clearly knows stuff when it comes to history. I doubt it, dude. I really doubt it. Maybe you both do and you just didn't show it well. But I can almost, like, after the first round, forgive you for not researching this harder as you go on, because it's not like Khan gave very much effort. Yeah, you both should have gave more effort, but if my opponent's not giving me much effort, I'm gonna have a hard time giving a lot of effort myself. And he's right here showing some quotes for the declarations of secession that show. So I think he's already given most of his quotes. And Lemming ends it with a bit repetitive, yeah, but still the arguments in a bit different ways with bits of new information. What I say, and still you're not responding to your opponent's arguments. You only exist in your world, buddy. You're only looking at your own arguments. You gotta look at what your opponent's argument. You responded to some like rebuttals here. But if you look here, slavery in the Constitution, people in power saying the words about slavery, the South's economic reliance on slavery, Abraham Lincoln's election being about slavery. You don't answer any of it. You just ignore it. The state's race to leave the Union was fought by the Confederacy, by their secession, and specifically against it by the Union, by their northern aggression. Recall round 2. Everybody always says the other side was like the aggressor, and here is probably the case that the northern side was the aggressor. It doesn't mean the cause of the war wasn't slavery, by the way. It just means that the North was the one that decided to they were invading the South, not the other way around. Recall also the causes I've mentioned round 2 on unfair tariffs and lack of electoral equality. Even without slavery, there are states that have different ways of life. You didn't really argue these. These weren't your main arguments, and you didn't spend too much time on them. But you only showed them to be some partial reasons, not the main reasons. When the ideas of states as countries more existed, how much more people would demand that their tribe not be dictated to in their own land. Aggravation and tribalism are not minor causes. Throughout the decades, one can see how even supposedly small differences such as clothing or hairstyles affect people. Consider the hippies versus the clean cut. Yeah, these are fun things. Like if you're a hippie or you are a preppy, it's fun to give each other shit and stuff about those things or to judge each other. But I think most people realize that you're not that different from other people just because they have a different style than you. That you're just having fun with the kind of group picking and stuff. Consider just twangs of voice such as for Okies in the Dust Bowl. Even minor aesthetic differences are huge in demonizing the other, that blow not unequal cause and stoking conflicts. Okay, so yeah, Pro won the debate because their arguments, there were no rebuttals to their arguments. Con lost because if you look here, you got rebuttals for all they say. Most soldiers did not care about slavery, and Pro points out that the cause of war is not the same thing as why people are fighting, why individuals are fighting. The biggest cause of war is feeling identity as one of states. And then Pro points out that nationalism is used to get people to sign up to fight in all wars. I think the one place that Khan had a great point was that just because the South seceded didn't mean the North had to attack. But that doesn't mean that the main cause of war still wasn't slavery. I mean, at that point, you're just kind of, what would you call it? Splitting hairs. No, I don't think the debate should be about splitting hairs. I think it should be about who legitimately won. And that's all from my recording. I'm sorry, I had some action there in the middle. But anyway, you guys have fun.